What's up everybody, I'm Raph and this is Barnaby the Bearded Dragon. I was on TikTok the other day and it came to my attention that a lot of people still think a 40-gallon enclosure is enough to house a bearded dragon like Barnaby for her entire life. Now that might have been true, that might have been accepted in the 90s when bearded dragons were put in captivity, but people also had iguanas in 20-gallon enclosures back then. So a lot has changed and today we're going to talk about why you can't keep a bearded dragon in a 40-gallon enclosure anymore. But before we get into it, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to Red Ribbon Reptiles, or else Barnaby is going to live the rest of her life in a shoebox. Okay, roll the intro. Talk about this old standard and how it came to be. A lot of pet shops, especially corporate stores, you guys know I'm not the biggest fan of things like PetSmart and Petco. These companies, they want to lower that barrier of entry really low so that many more people come through. Every pet shop has a bunch of little baby beardies running around, and so they'll tell you pretty much anything to get you to want to purchase one of these bad boys right here. I can't say that we're not guilty of this ourselves. Our first 3 reptiles were impulse buys, our 2 leopard geckos and Barnaby. We've learned a lot since then, and now we can really take pride in our husbandry. Of course, not perfect. We can get better every day. But I'm proud to say that Barnaby no longer lives in the 40-gallon enclosure that she lived in for the first couple months when we first got her. For a baby, yeah, it's okay, obviously. But you can put a bearded dragon in a large enclosure, even if it's a tiny little baby, and it will use all of it. They are relatively active semi-arboreal lizards. 40-gallon enclosures are also about as big as it gets, where they're like widespread, readily available. You can find things like 75 gallons pretty easily. And depending, we're in a pretty rural type environment. We live in a small city, but surrounded by no more cities. So it is hard for people to just go out and get whatever you can get, like let's say in bigger cities. And these enclosures, these 40 gallons, are also a lot more reasonable for as far as the footprint goes in somebody's house, right? It's about 3 foot wide and 18 inches deep, I think. Our Euromastix lives in there. It's pretty small for him too. He's actually getting an upgrade pretty soon. But we'll talk about the rule of thumb for lizards and how big their enclosure should be. And that's why I feel comfortable with having him in there temporarily. So again, we had Barnaby for a couple months in this 40-gallon enclosure. But as we started really compiling a bunch of research and trying to gain a lot of information on how to better keep these animals, she was growing during that time. And that's when it became blatantly obvious that she no longer belonged in there and she needed something a bit bigger. Some people will still say a 75-gallon enclosure. Look, I'm not the authority on reptile keeping. Hey, don't even listen to me if you don't want, right? I'm just trying to let you guys know how to kind of better keep these animals, at least a little bit, better than a 40, what we got going on. That's for sure. Because the truth is that bearded dragons require a much bigger area than a 40-gallon, and here's why. Okay, so the basic rule of thumb, the easiest way to put this really, let me use my trusty assistant here, is you want the enclosure's length, as far as lizards go, should be twice the length of the lizard. So, Barnaby is not a huge bearded dragon. I wouldn't say she's a small one either. She's about 20 inches from the tip of her nose to the tip of her tail. All right. So that times 2 is 40 inches. So 40-gallon enclosure, not going to work because it's about 36 inches, about 3 feet from one side to the other. And as far as the other dimension goes, we're talking depth. Yeah, we're not talking about height. We're talking about depth, right? Front to back. It has to be the length of the lizard, minimum, right? So Barnaby being 20 inches, the 18-inch enclosure width is not going to cut it for her. This is the most comprehensive way that I've understood this, because you have to think, right? If it's not as wide as the lizard is, or as the lizard is long, then the lizard has to, and I know a lot of this is tail, and I understand, but then they are always uncomfortable when they turn around. They can't turn around fully if the enclosure is not as wide as it or deep as the lizard is long. So if we had Bartleby in this 40-gallon right now, she would have a hard time turning around. And to me, that's really no life to live. And then the other dimension we talked about was the length. And that way she can at least run twice the distance of her body across and forward. Plus, a longer enclosure is going to help with the thermal gradient or the temperature gradient from one side to the other, having a hot side and a cool side. The longer it is, the more variation she has, and she can get comfortable wherever she darn well pleases. So the other dimension we're going to talk about is height, because another thing that I saw, and this is just crazy, bearded dragons, they don't need to climb. They just need floor space, and that's it. Semi-arboreal lizard. Semi-arboreal meaning, yeah, they don't live in the treetops. They're not gonna... Honestly, I think they would climb as high as you give them. If they have something to climb on, they're gonna keep climbing, in my experience. Bartleby's enclosure is 2 foot high, and now that we've made this semi-naturalistic background that has like a climbing surface, she spends most of her time at the tippy top, as high as she can get, and she just kind of chills out there. So, and this helps them either see things like birds of prey that are going to eat them in the wild, and it gives them more access to see food or any other threats too that could be coming to get them. So what is the new standard, or should be the new standard for keeping a bearded dragon? I have to say it's a 4 foot long, 2 foot deep, 2 foot high. That's, I'm not going to call that the bare minimum, because I assume you can keep it in a 75 if you were so inclined. I don't see why you would, when you could just put them in a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, which it comes out to 120 gallons, by the way. This way, the lizard has access to move about comfortably. She didn't ask to be here, so the least I could do is give her more than the equivalent of like a closet, right? Because if we're talking bare minimums, and you want to say the bare minimum is 40 gallons, you can live in a closet. We're oriented upright as opposed to across here like a bearded dragon, but in that case, if she can't even take a couple steps that way or that way and can't really turn around, put yourself in a closet. You take a couple steps over there. Not even a bedroom. I'd say 75 is more like a bedroom, and then you start moving into house territory with a 120 gallon enclosure. And some other things people will say to counter this is like, well, they don't really move, they just kind of sit in one spot. A lot of the time. You're right. A lot of the time, hours will go by and I'll come back in here and I see Bartleby in the same spot. So a couple of things, right? I'm giving her the option anyway. Even if she doesn't choose it. Even if she doesn't want to use it at all, she doesn't want to move, okay, she has the option to. That's a monkey off my back. I'm keeping her in a place where she at least has the option to move around. Another thing is, I just take them out and play with them all the time. Well, then especially if you're overfeeding them, which a lot of people overfeed their beardies, even Bartleby's a little bit chunky, way chunkier than you see in the wild, but I'm not going to say that every wild bearded dragon is the picture of health, because, they live a pretty rough place in the outback of Australia, so maybe they're not getting enough food, not hydrated enough. So, we like that Bartleby's a little bigger than a wild bearded dragon, but a lot of people have obese bearded dragons. And so when you're overfeeding them and you're taking them out all the time and they can't stay as warm as they would like to, now they can't digest and metabolize, right? Because they're not going to burn off weight per se by exercising like humans will. Somewhat, sure, because they're using metabolism to move around, but their metabolism comes from the temperature that they're at. That's why that's why they need to warm up. They're ectothermic. I don't like the term cold-blooded. They have they blood like anyone else, right? But we're endothermic, so we make our heat inside. She's ectothermic. She gets her heat from the outside. And don't get me started on free roaming. Take them out a good amount for enrichment purposes and stuff like that. But they should have a suitable enclosure that they can live in, primarily. Plus, what if you're not home? You're just going to leave them just sit, and, she'll sit in one spot if she wants to. I'm not going to force her to sit in one spot. She do what she wants. She independent. Ain't gonna poop on me. So all this really raises the big question, why would you shoot for the bare minimum anyway? Let's say 40 gallon is the bare minimum. Why? Why wouldn't you make at least a 75, right? And another counter is people are like, it's so expensive. You know, I have to put like a month's rent to buy an enclosure. You can easily spend a month's rent, depending on where you live, on a adequately sized bearded dragon enclosure. Or you could buy like a 4x8 sheet of plywood for like 80 bucks. Get some screws, put it together, you know, figure out what you need, the door and everything like that. And now you have one for just over $100, which I'm not saying, you know, I know money doesn't grow on trees. I totally understand. But the thing is, you're keeping a living being, you know? So that's commitment. You goofed already then, you know, rehome it to someone that will take good care of it. That's not a real excuse, you know. You can make an enclosure, and it's not like building a house. It's pretty simple. You know, we made this PVC for Barbie. It's a little bit ugly, but it does the job just right, and that was the first one we've ever made. So, you know, I don't think that's an adequate response. You know, it's too expensive. I can't do it. Well, why'd you get the lizard? Don't get a lizard, or get a leopard gecko. You know, a little 20-gallon. You know, it's enough. You can probably go bigger for sure. You definitely can go bigger, but you know, all right, we're chilling. So the last thing I have to say, and why I think this kind of grinds my gears the way it does, is we have to do better so that we can remove the stigma on reptile keeping, right? Because when people talk about reptile keepers, Melon's mister went off. Because when people talk about reptile keeping, it's like they think about the old days. Like I said, an iguana in a 20, like even like I won't say full grown, but a juvenile iguana in a 20 is absolutely ridiculous, you know? And that's kind of the image a lot of people have in their heads. So when you can make a full-size, you know, partially naturalistic enclosure, we definitely have more upgrades to do on Barbie, but she's comfortable in there for now. When you have something like that simulating, at least simulating, I'm not saying it's anything like their natural environment, but something that, you know, it provides enrichment even while in the enclosure, so you're not constantly having to take them out. You can just take them out as much as you would like, especially bearded dragons. They don't seem to mind really much at all. So we have to get rid of this stigma, especially because, in my opinion, reptile keeping is probably the most humane pet keeping. Now, dogs have been domesticated so thoroughly that maybe they are dependent, even emotionally, on people. Whereas, you know, I feel better about my reptile room than keeping my cats. You know, we live in an apartment, and I know they want to be running around, and we play with them, and they get their own enrichment too. But my point is, I feel like the cats are thinking through more. There are definitely intelligent reptiles that can kind of realize a bad situation. I'm not too sure if bearded dragons are those reptiles. But the point is, you know, reptile keeping, they want to be safe from predators, and they want food. And I don't know if they want it to be clean, but you should keep it clean. But if you're doing those three things, right, you're not scaring the life out of it. You're feeding it adequately, and you're not making it live in its own poop. I don't see the problem really with reptile keeping. Couple simple adjustments, you know, go a little bigger on the enclosure, and I think these animals will have just a great life. So that's it, you guys. I'm not trying to be a cage Karen, you know, like, I know I still do things that aren't perfect, let's say, but we try to do better every day, and that's all you can do. I also want to say reptiles are a commitment. It can be a relatively easy commitment, and especially if you just have one, it can just be a nice part of your life as opposed to consuming your life. That doesn't mean that you can just kind of go willy-nilly and do whatever you want, really. You should at least do the research and figure out how to make your reptile's life more comfortable. So if you like this video, if you like Barbie, you think she's cute, like this video and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot, it really helps out. We're closing in on 100. I think at 100 subscribers, we're gonna do a full feeding video, everything. The cats, turtles, chameleon, everybody's getting fed on camera, and we'll show you guys that. Kind of like another reptile room tour, but instead with bites and food. Not biting us, they don't bite us. Did anybody bite us? Petunia bit me once, hognose snakes, you know? What can you do? Barbie also bit me one time when I was trying to feed her banana. It got stuck to my finger, and she was not ready to wait, so. And let me know what you guys think. Do you think a 40 gallon is sufficient for an adult bearded dragon? I'll say adult because you can get away for a few months, you know what I mean? It'll be appropriate, but then it quickly won't be appropriate. And if you have to buy 2 enclosures, now you're really wasting money. In our case, we were going to find something to put in it, so it wasn't a huge deal. But, yeah, 1 enclosure is way easier than 2. So if you can do it in 1, that's probably what you should do. Yeah, so let us know what you think, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this is the beautiful Barnaby, and I'm Raph the human, and we'll see you next time.